old fashioned 1700s, 1800s stuff.
All right, I believe that.
You know, I like numbers, but that's back when they were something like that.
But my point is that God is infinitely greater than those
Yeah.
entities, which are already hard enough to grasp.
Yeah.
If you guys, welcome to Maple Syrup History, episode number 4. People watching on the YouTube channel later will be like, where's number 3? I forgot to record it. So that's that. That's how it works. If you forget to record it, you don't have it. I want to start with the synapse today and then do the first part of the Reconstruction lecture. Anyone know the Temptation song "My Girl"? The song "My Girl" by the Temptations.
Okay, sure.
Oh, yes, that one.
I promised Dave Schmidt that I would sing a parody of that when he comes back. So I think I have to do it. Let me see though. Is anyone online? No one's online right now. Let me see. Let me get my coffee. This is freezing. Why is this freezing? Dave, if you have your screen open, because I've got a screen share.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. You see my thing? Civil War synapse.
Hamburger. And what about? Yeah, this.
Yeah. Those are the notes I'm going to read to you from. Okay, so the song is right, like, I've got so much honey, the bees envy me. I've got a sweeter song than any birds in the trees. I guess you say, what can make me, right? That's the real song. That's the real song. So I've got this, ready? I've got so much chronology, the statisticians envy me. I've got more dates on the board than a farmer who's Israeli. I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? Civil War history and maple syrup pancakes. Woo. Okay. So, all right, thank you. Ryan Alexander hated it. He was dying of cringe the whole time. He freaking hated it.
You're throwing out some epic similes, like they've got more dates on the board than an Israeli farmer.
Yeah, because there's lots of dates in Israel, guys. There's a date, like the fruit. I'm gonna sing the song again the whole way through without laughing. I'm gonna be serious. Ready? Everyone ready for this? Doesn't work. Is everyone ready? Because then I'm getting some maple syrup.
Everyone else get up and down.
You can dance as much as you want. Only Ryan Alexander dance. Okay. Okay, ready? Without laughing. Ready? I've got so much chronology, the statisticians envy me. I've got more dates on the board than a farmer. I can't get through it. I can't. One more time. Guys, this is freaking serious stuff. Okay? This is an audition. This is an audition tape for a musical about Israeli Motown music. Is everyone ready? I've got so much chronology, the statisticians envy me. I've got more dates on the board than a farmer who's Israeli. I guess you say, what can make me feel that way? Oh, pancakes, woo. Maple syrup. No, it's that maple syrup. Okay, so we're doing full Civil War synapse first. Oh, you guys can't get serious. Seriously, you guys can't get serious one time. It's terrible, especially Ryan. So if Dave has this thing up, what I'm going to do for you later, if you want this information, Barb cannot solicit it, unfortunately, because she doesn't have email. Is that correct? Right. But anyone who wants this information later, I will send it to you in a compressed PDF file. Okay. So it's very, very simple. You can download and have it. What it is, I'm going to read it to you word for word off the board. And by the way, Mr. Earl Aston and Miss Barbara Aston, Heather Meyer told me there was questions about where this stuff is being, where it's being posted. And I told you, I told all of you, since Anna Crestlin's left, and plus me being an idiot, it's not been on the Vandal Catholic normal spot, but I've been uploading it to like a personal channel. So I sent Dave a couple copies of maple syrup. And
your viewership is.
my viewership is skyrocketing. I have one subscriber now, Eli Lohman. He subscribed to my channel.
Wait. You have a YouTube channel?
On my own. Dude, it's got 95 million views, man.
All right, cool.
All right. So, and here's what I'm gonna read you word for word, especially for Ryan. Antebellum Arrow Appomattox. Okay, full Civil War synapse. Why am I doing this? Because today we begin our next chronology. We depart from the books and return back to where we started in this class with chronology. If everyone can see, Dave has it up right now. This has handwritten notes, right? With maple syrup pancakes in the bottom, Canadian maple syrup, and Winco maple syrup on the top. But the notes are not obstructed. And this, whoever wants this later on, I will send again via, oh wait, it ended my slideshow. Oh wait.
I think that's the
Wait.
hand of God.
Wait, what is it? Okay, wait a second. It's gonna come back.
Oh.
It's gonna come back. Anyone who wants this again it'll be a compressed PDF later on. So it'll be very simple to get after. We're gonna cover this, and as the syllabus states, we are right on schedule. We're gonna start the first of 3 Reconstruction lectures. Okay, first thing I have listed, right? This is the entire class in miniature, the last 2.5 months up to now. Religion, commerce, GR philosophy, E-lib republicanism. Remember, those are the 4 themes beginning at the very start of the class. First theme that I said, define the sectional split between North and South, okay? Religion. Remember, the South is the what? The blank. What is the South? Yeah, but what's the moniker for the South? The Bible Belt. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. And you can argue the Bible Belt is not yet so much in 1776. It's kind of the second great awakening of 1805, but fine. Exactly. Bible Belt, Baptist, Methodist, kind of personal relationship with Christ, biblical faith, whereas the North are these Puritan Calvinist guys, the Pilgrims, who at first had this great communitarian ethos of building heaven on earth. However, we may disagree with that theologically as Catholics. They were sincere in their faith. Percy Miller argues Puritans lose their faith and then transfer into social change, right? I no longer believe in the strictures, the guidelines, the whatever of my Protestant faith. I'm going to try to make society better with women's suffrage, temperance, anti-slavery, those kind of things. Commerce, right? We say perhaps, what about the capitalistic North industrial revolution versus the more agrarian feudal South? A great book suggestion is Thomas Haddock's Fears and Fascinations. It's about Catholicism in the South. Greco-Roman philosophy. Greece is more like the South, more Delian League, loosely bound states' rights. Rome, all leads to Rome centralization, which is the second great cause of how the Civil War ends, right? The most important thing we know about the Civil War is the end of slavery, thank God. But no less important, it might be less important, you can say, but it's no less prominent, is the way that America becomes this very strongly centralized power in economics and politics across the board. And finally, both of these people, North and South, all Americans, look to 1688 in the British Constitution and kind of the Enlightenment writ large, this kind of Franco-British melange, mix of ideas of the 18th century to inform them as well, right? Okay, those are the long roots. Then I get into the ideological roots. The next line, Dave Schmidt can follow along. So Dave, it's not canceled again, right? It's still good.
It's still beautiful.
If I click this way, it ends slideshow. That was epic fail.
Really nice. Gosh, really nice.
Thanks. Do you like the pancake art I chose?
Just inspired.
Good. That's what I'm looking for. The Kirkland maple syrup in the upper left-hand corner, not gonna lie, no offense to Kirkland, this looks gross. I don't know why I included it. The bottom right Canadian one looks good. Well, anyways, roots, AR 1776. Both North and South say we are the progeny, we are the successors of the founding fathers. We're keeping America together because we're trying to keep this dream alive. When they broke away from the tyranny of King George III, No one gets married to get divorced. We are the real kind of successors, founding fathers. The South says the same thing. You always can tell when something is a very strong idea or has a lot of pull, and even competing sides will claim, we're the true kind of inheritors of this. Today, the Republicans and Democrats will often cite common people as like, this is the real vision of how America's supposed to be, and they'll cite common ideological trends or whatever, right? Both the North and South looked at the revolution for different reasons. The South would respond, oh, you guys broke away from King George III. That is who Abraham Lincoln is standing in person of now. We're doing the same thing against this tyranny. War of 1812 plus M dest equals what kind of US? The War of 1812, when we defeat the British for a second time, guarantees our independence. We'll soon develop the Monroe Doctrine. The Western Hemisphere is closed to Europe, closed to any kind of monarchy. It's for democracy. It's for, it's our interest. It's not yet Roosevelt's corollary of 1904, where it's like we can do whatever we want. The Western Hemisphere is our backyard, but America's gaining this identity. So manifest destiny. We're providentially selected to go from sea to shining sea. That's going to ask the question, with the slavery question still open, what kind of US? That's that second line. If you look at this later on and you watch this video, I think it'll be helpful. My explanations plus your excellent comments, all that kind of stuff, it'll elucidate some of the shorthand stuff that I have here. And I'm really excited to do this because I hope as I'm reading through these, you're like, this is old news. I hope you're like, I learned this before, I remember it, and it's fantastic. The more we can retain from this class, praise God, the better. 1820s, NE reform over nullification. Again, that's a repetition of what I said earlier with religion. The 1820s and 30s are this great time of social change, of social wokeism, social activism, social justice warriors, all these anachronistic terms. But that idea of like, I'm going to improve society with women's suffrage, no drinking, no slavery, whatever, maybe hygiene. A lot of those movements emerge out of New England. And so it's unsurprising that people say ideologically the Civil War is New England or is Massachusetts versus South Carolina. On the bottom part of that, the lower denominator, South Carolina is the hotbed of the fire eaters, of the people that are like, first in the 1820s, we're going to nullify laws we don't like, which seems kind of like a proto-secessionist thing. So South Carolina perhaps is the avant-garde. They will be the first state to secede, as you know as well, of the Southern independent spirit, that Greek states' rights. We are our own country. We interpret 1776 to mean that the Constitution enshrines these kind of individual countries in partnership with one another, but not with the lines erased. That's South Carolina. Well, if you agree, it's good that the North wanted to tell the South what to do, because the South was evil and they're a bunch of racist slave owners, and they should have their culture changed and reformed. Well, unsurprising, Massachusetts is leading that ideological push. They want to do this with a lot of different things, right, at this time. It's not just like the Seneca Falls Conference, the first great movement of the women's rights type stuff is in New York, those northern states. All right, go ahead.
And the temperance movement, I think, is also just another representation of that. It's like, look, all these drunkards don't know what's good for them. So we need to make sure that we do what's good for them, which is remove liquor from the shelves and make sure they can get their hands on it because they're too drunk to handle it themselves.
Excellent.
And too Irish, probably.
Too Irish, too Catholic, too drunk. Exactly. Yeah, that's brilliant. And these people will have their heyday in the quote unquote progressive movement with, I believe it's the 18th Amendment, prohibition, and that outlaws, alcohol. Sorry.
Prohibition, women's suffrage, and income tax are probably like
the
heyday of progressivism, and probably will to a certain extent Roosevelt, but especially Wilson through FDR, and FDR is the high one. Wilson and FDR are the high one.
FDR goes crazy with, yeah, exactly, with all the kind of different social programs and stuff, right? Which, again, not to get too far afield, but often a crisis affords that opportunity. You have the Great Depression, FDR is, okay, well, we're going to start doing a lot of things we still have with us today. Social Security, that third rail that no politician will touch left or right, it comes out of this era. Excellent, exactly. 1830s and 40s, I have Texas, MXAM, war, TRGH, Gold Rush, Oregon Trail, and I have an arrow up to what kind of US. 1830s and 40s, when the Texas question is settled in the subsequent Mexican-American War, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo brings in all that land. The Colorado and California gold rushes, Alta California. We talked about the Mormons coming west as well. It just exacerbates this question of, on the East Coast, prior to the War of 1812, we already have a kind of North versus South thing. As these spread west, each is going to try to press his own respective advantage. That will lead, I dared dare not say inevitably, nothing is inevitable, God alone knows, there's always contingencies, but will lead to this perhaps when the war breaks out, was obvious because look what was going on. 1850s is the ultimate hot point. Talked about that decade, I think in class number 4. Harriet Beecher Stowe is the first thing, Uncle Tom's Cabin. The woman who caused the war, Lincoln said, by just maybe inflaming northern passions against slavery. I don't have something listed here, which we should mention, was also the Compromise of 1850, right, where the DC slave trade is banned, but the most egregious thing, the Fugitive Slave Act, capturing runaway slaves, returning them, makes Northerners feel, Elizabeth Varron, this historian, said, complicit in the South sin. I may be opposed to slavery or not in the North. If I have to actually capture people and return them, now I'm participating. Like a law saying you have to participate in abortions. You have to go, or you have to personally donate 5% to Planned Parenthood. I mean, that might really inflame some pro-life passions. I'm already pro-life. I'm already opposing abortion. A law now is requiring that I escort people to get safe abortions. Imagine a law like that. Talk about the violation of conscience, whatever. That's kind of how people look at this in some ways. Kansas-Nebraska Act violates the previous compromise of 1820. It's supposed to be all above the 3630 parallel free. People say it doesn't matter that Nebraska comes in as a free state. Kansas is above that allowable Missouri line, and it's slave that leads unsurprisingly to bleeding Kansas. BLKS is that. Dred Scott, that shameful decision that a person of African descent can never be a citizen, and John Brown, the straw that breaks the camel's back. The raid on Harper's Ferry. That ends our kind of like antebellum stuff. We probably spent 3 weeks talking about that. Then I have enlisted in order the 6 years of the war. You can begin with 1860. December 20th, South Carolina secedes first. Then I say, event, and by that I mean eventually, you get in order after South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas by February 1st, Virginia, North Carolina, Arkansas, and Tennessee, an 11-state confederacy by the spring. And the 3 great moments of 1860, I have arrows now up from 1861 because it's already continued on to that year. April 1861, Fort Sumter. Remember, the first shots were fired of the war. July, first Manassas or first Bull Run, that great psychological, that's the abbreviation there. People come out with picnic baskets, watch the football game, whatever. And the great international Trent crisis, we talked about so many times, is November 61. That same year I have here, plus King Cotton. How does that fail? Remember? Oh, you guys will just turn off the cotton spigot, recognize this. No, right? We talked about the reasons why no. But that fails. But the Confederacy, BEL versus rebel, are they belligerents? Are they rebels? European views on the conflict, what are they? We talked about that almost all of Europe is favorable towards the Confederacy in some ways because they would like to see this growing power that America is. People like Alexis de Tocqueville predict will one day be, very important world players, fall apart, and yet not Europe as well cannot support slavery. So that's, conservatives and liberals in Europe are opposed to slavery. How does that work? 1862, February, FH and FD. What does that stand for? Now I'm going to test you. Who remembers? Fort Gregory Peck.
Fort something and Fort something. That's all I can tell you. One starts with an H and one starts with a D.
Good. I mean, that's
Donaldson?
Donaldson is number 2, epic, crushing. Donaldson is correct. Fort Henry and Fort Donaldson. This is Union success in Tennessee, which leads to, I have one thing, Shiloh, which is a stalemate battle, but nonetheless, NOLA, New Orleans being captured in April. Awesome. Arrow up for the Union in the West, but in the East, right? Jackson in the Valley. Jackson Valley is Jackson in the Shenandoah Valley. This is why, hence, these short notes are better explained live. Maybe later you're like, what is Jackson Valley? Jackson in the Shenandoah Valley during that awesome 17,000 against 52,000 men. He crushes, prevents the Union from uniting. Lee takes over in June, equals SP, 7 Pines, SD, 7 days until second Manassas. And the first invasion of the North, that fails at September, S. Antietam, Sharpsburg, Antietam. Most famously, Sharpsburg, Antietam ends the first invasion of the North. However, what happens is what's issued September 22nd of 1862? The Emancipation Proclamation, right? In December, Fredericksburg, more victory for the South, but first invasion fails. 63, January 1, proclamation, right? In the East, Chancellorsville is a huge loss because Jackson is killed. We talked about that often, right? Friendly fire in May, but the South is still advancing. However, I have like bolded and rectangled in, I guess, boxed in Gettysburg, Vicksburg, the twin defeats or the twin victories, depending on what your battle. east and west, right? Gettysburg, July 1st to 3rd, Vicksburg, July 4th, 63. The writings on the wall at that time. Chickamauga, a Confederate victory, but Chattanooga, this Union victory, RR. What does that mean? What does Chattanooga RR mean?
Really.
Exactly, right? The cutting of the railroads in the South all leads to early 64. Grant, Sherman. Grant, March 64 is when he takes in with Sherman will equal attrition war. Remember this constant attrition war. And I have arrow like Wilderness, Cold Harbor, pinning the names to the lapel, right? He's going to do his march to the sea eventually. The only other battle I've circled here, these are probably the three most important battles of the war, probably, or four, are Sharpsburg, Antietam, end of the first Southern invasion plus Emancipation Proclamation, Gettysburg, Vicksburg, which despite being across the map, you can count as one kind of event, one cataclysmic event, apocalyptic disaster for the South. The other one is Atlanta, right? I have Atlanta circled, September plus election. Remember, Lincoln is resigned to the fact I will not be reelected. Atlanta falls, oh, great. And he wins 213 to 12 electoral votes. That all leads to April to 1865, April 9 to 14, check mark. April 9, Palm Sunday, Appomattox. April 14th, what happens? Exactly, the assassination of Lincoln. But I kind of conclude on the synapse. I mean, that's the war is over, I guess, at that point. We're going to move rightfully so to Reconstruction. But I ask, but what of shifting society? What about economics? What about the role of women? Remember the bread riots, the draft riots, talked about that in the North, bread and other. And I have with a sick purple background and hot pink, triple asterisk. And what about the Catholic Civil War? At home, abroad diplomacy, bishops, soldiers, sister nurses. I have sister nurses misspelled, nurses with an I. Nurses are like superhero sister nurses. They're above and beyond the call of duty. The I is like it's.
Yeah, it's that simple.
Are we talking about facts or truth here today? Like
Syrup.
or syrup? Are we just pouring syrup on our? Are we showering in maple syrup? I just want to know. The sister nurses, right, are the most, just going full Catholic here, the most prolific converters of the war. We talk about that often. They're medical professionals, but I want to join the sister church, but I hate Catholics. Not that they're, oh, they're Catholics. Okay, I guess I'm Catholic. Like that was so often. The soldiers, were very much like, I'll do my duty as a soldier, but I'm going to pray. And remember the Rabel book? We talked about that a lot. That's not on the synapse. What about all the books? Rabel talks about the difference of Protestant and Catholic worship in camps. It's the same as today. I'm a Protestant. I go to the revival. I read my Bible. I try to get saved. As a Protestant would say, altar calls. Whereas Catholics, I want to be in a state of grace. I pray my rosary. I go to mass. I go to confession. Abroad in diplomacy, it's one of the most fascinating factors, right? O'Donnell, Hughes, and Pius IX talked a lot about that. Pius, the only kind of world potentiate, as Ambrose Dudley Mann says, who recognized the South, dear sir, honorable, illustrious president, talked all about that, right? And that the bishops in the Civil War, kind of reverse engineering backwards to the first question, the bishops, I said that they're highly politicized and they fall on the fault lines. If you're a bishop in the North, you supported the Union, the South, almost the general rule. Some bishops are more politicized than others. Bishop Martin John Spalding, in a border state in Kentucky, in Louisville, was very neutral. Didn't want to do have a lot to do with the war, whereas Archbishop Hughes basically is an agent for the North in New York, and Archbishop Lynch is an official agent in the Confederacy. Remember Father Bannon in Ireland, all of that. Okay, that is the full synapse. Let me stop my slideshow. X out of that.
But there were more pictures.
Screen sharing is stopped as the share window is closed. Let me see this. Yeah, good. Share window gone. All right. That's what I wanted all along. I'm going to try to read to you now just some info on the first part of our Reconstruction lecture, because, right, I have three lectures for you on this topic. Reconstruction today, the early years, then the radical phase on Wednesday, and the next Monday week from today, the end of Reconstruction, 73 to 77. Sorry, Reconstruction, all apologies. Yeah, I know we dedicated 3 months to the Civil War, which is 4 years, and we're going to cover 12 years of Reconstruction in 3 days. No apologies, though. Really, I'm not really sorry at all. I think the Civil War is way more important, but you should talk about this. It's the same way, like in our direct comparison to our World War I class. You can't not talk about Versailles and the peace settlement after the war, but I'd rather talk about the war. You should mention what happens next with Hitler and Mussolini and the interwar period, but I still rather focus on the First World War. Same kind of thing. And then we only have really one more book left to discuss, starting on the 20th already. that'll be in the Easter octave at that point. So happy Easter in the future then. We'll be talking about Eric Foner, some back to airs a little bit, and then just have our kind of finish up. In May, I just have for you thematic alternate history musings, 1 and 2. So let's see what that means. Yeah, okay. I want to start singing again. I'm not going to though. I'm not going to do it again. All right, I know. That's enough for a lifetime. I was going to die. I was going to have to hear you sing again, so I won't. Okay. Wait, Ryan wants me to sing. I guess for him, I'll do it. Okay, so first point today. Let's just do point by point. I want to be like Brad King, a man of highly efficient production, a man who produces stuff, does work. Brad King comes in, no one asks, is the clock punched? It's destroyed. It's been so well punched. He literally punches the clock with so much production, he physically destroys the clock with his fist. That's what I want to do today in terms of discussing this information. So, number one, Eric Foner, the historian that we'll discuss in his last book, argues Reconstruction begins in 1863. Why? Well, who can tell me? It's a very obvious, easy answer. But Foner says, see, I disagree. I like time. I like linear time. 1863, the war is afoot, guys. You can't fix the vase when it's not broken yet, right? But what's his argument?
The Union is taking Confederate territory and it has to figure out what are we going to do with that, especially since they're rebels and traitors. So we need to figure out, okay, like what sort of laws are we going to be putting in place that are different for the rest of the Union, United States territory. If you don't want to say that's in the Union, it's going to lead to some interesting. I mean, stuff I'm studying in my constitutional law class, studied about 6 weeks ago, including was it ex parte McCardle? Do you mind if I butt in on this? And
I don't. You can say it honestly, whatever you want.
So ex parte McCardle is a case where basically so the Union's taking Confederate territory. There's a Confederate, pro-Confederate newspaper editor in one of these cities, I think Mississippi maybe, and he's publishing anti-union things. And then the military rule, the leader, like the colonel, whoever's in charge of the city, ends up charging him for this. And he says, hang on, wait a second, under the First Amendment, I have a right to not publish this kind of things, to say these kind of things. First off, second, you're trying me in military court, which you can't do because I'm not a military operative, I'm a civilian. So there's like some really good legal theories. And for why this is significant to constitutional law history, so he gets it all the way up to the Supreme Court. Congress passes a law which says this kind of case cannot be appealed to the Supreme Court. Because in the US Constitution, there's a clause that says Congress can make exceptions to the kind of cases that can be brought to the Supreme Court. This is in Article 3. So Congress passed a law saying his case cannot be brought to the Supreme Court, essentially. And so the Supreme Court looked at it and said, well, I mean, that's in the Constitution. You can't do anything about it. And this case kind of stopped there. But that's the sort of thing that's going on, really, is like.
What was the resolution then?
That was the resolution. Supreme Court, I mean, I don't know overall, I think he called up, so I don't know like whether he got vindicated. I mean, I think at some point in time, obviously, in Reconstruction, the military rules stopped. But that's kind of gives an example of like the sort of stuff that's going on. Like the military is basically trying to take control of these places versus the people there who are saying, yeah, well, we're back in the Union. I guess that means you don't have slavery, these other things, but we want to have all our rights as Americans, even though we were rebelling against the Washington, D.C. Just a few weeks ago. So there's all these contrary forces, and of course there's good arguments to be made on both sides of what's.
Before knowing or learning all that, which is fascinating, I was gonna venture that it was the Emancipation Proclamation that Palmer is talking about, that began Reconstruction. Because it changed
Yeah, so
the
I'll
complexion of our country.
I'll second your answer. That was very impressive and beautiful and cool. Seriously, like forever, like no one's ever butting in. Talk about whatever you want. It always enriches the class. Thank you for that. Yes, that is the thing he's talking about specifically, is that Foner says when the Emancipation Proclamation is issued September 22nd of 62, effective the 1st of 63, Reconstruction begins because we are going to be reconstructing America along the lines of a new equality. That's it, period. Your points, epic. I mean, I like your arguments, even they're way more even complex and beautiful. But this is very simplistic from his argument. When you read this Reconstruction book, that's just what he's saying. He's like, Foner swallows hook, line, and sinker the idea. I'm not saying he's wrong, but that it's all about African-American equality, the war. Foner will acknowledge like, okay, sadly, because racism is bad and a lot of these guys were racist, a lot of people didn't want to fight for African-American equality, North or South. He'll say that may be true. And Lincoln himself is kind of like, kind of wishy-washy. However, when this gets enacted, it's almost like this golden law that just changes the game. And that's why he says it starts. So historians, this is point number one of our thing today, because the synapse is kind of a preamble, right? Just a review. This is point number one of today's lecture. You can date Reconstruction from 63 or 65, knock your socks off. But that's the justification usually, is you say, no, it's 65 because there's no Reconstruction till it's over. There's no overtime. You can't say overtime in the football game began in the third quarter. The game has to be over, then overtime starts. The very common sense, practical, what everyone has always said is simply Reconstruction begins that process, which you describe, Artie, of thinking of what we're going to do to these rebellious guys if we conquer the South, might have begun from the first shots being fired. But not until Appomattox, not until Lee surrenders to Grant can we begin reconstructing a broken country. The other argument, do not lose your train of thought, is that it's a moral, ethical thing that begins with the Emancipation Proclamation. That's the two main arguments. Point number one. Go ahead. Yes.
So what are they going to be doing with the traitors? That's why they started the ironclad peoples.
Yes, and that's very, very good. So we'll talk about that even next class. Today is, no, that's great. Your point is freaking right on topic. Excellent. Crushing. 100 out of 100. It's not like, oh, wait. No, but I'm just saying, like, we're going to get into a lot of that, especially in the radical phase. Today's the presidential phase, 63 to 65. We're just kind of still ending the war. I actually have a couple things from the war. Our next Reconstruction lecture on Wednesday is going to be the big one. The 7 years, rioting, voting, a lot of stuff going on. And yes, I'm actually going to talk about oaths today. There's this idea, which seems common sense enough. You know, I'm the president of the US or some governor. I'm not going to let Dave Schmidt, governor of Georgia, and his rebels come back until X percentage takes an oath of fealty, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, back to the Union, and acknowledges they were wrong. That's not good enough. They have to do their penance now, and also go further and say we pledge an oath of allegiance back to, the Union. So that's very, very good. Okay. Now, second thing, guys, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, todos. Una palabra español hoy en día, solamente uno. Pero la próxima clase es solamente en español.
¿Pero?
Porque español es mejor que inglés. Inglés no me gusta mucho. Lo siento, pero inglés es un desastre de idioma. Okay, important things. Trish Schmidt, you want business, you want facts. You've come into like Merrill Lynch portfolio discussion. Here it is for Reconstruction. You can say with this that Reconstruction is either a closed event. This is point number two, right? Point number one was, again, like what I just said right now. Does Reconstruction begin after or with the Emancipation Proclamation? Point number two of today. Is Reconstruction a closed event unto itself, or is it part of a long durée of civil rights? I like the second option, actually. I'll talk about the first. First is simply, look, Reconstruction happened. Anyone know the three most important kind of legal, I want even beyond jurisprudential, just kind of like enacted in law, like things, amendments. What are the three amendments passed during the Reconstruction era this is everything?
Okay.
Go for it.
All right.
Go full lawyer.
13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. 13th Amendment bars slavery in the United States except as punishment for crime, prosecute. So like that's going to be, hard labor, that kind of thing. So unless there's a criminal prosecution, you cannot enforce. There's no more indentured servitude or slavery, which interestingly we talked about in our contracts class the other day, because you can't bind people on a contract to be your slave. So just random fact. We can't do it anymore. It used to be able to. The 14th Amendment, which is super important. And like this really changes the entire structure of the U.S. government, because it does something which nothing else had done up to this point. It extends the Bill of Rights to the states. The Bill of Rights did not apply to the states. The protections and rights enumerated in the US Constitution did not apply to the states until the 14th Amendment was passed, among other things. And where that's gonna wind up being significant is, for instance, Massachusetts had a state church until the 1820s. For reference, so like there's stuff like that, and now we think, oh my goodness, like that's completely against the structure of our government. But state establishment of religion was appropriate before the 14th Amendment was passed, as well as some of the other rights and things. And now the counterbalance to that is that the states also have their own protections and their own constitutions and in their own laws. So there was the idea of, oh yeah, the states and the people who make these constitutions are intelligent enough to provide for their own protection. You don't need the Bill of Rights to cover them. So that's a pretty big part of the 14th Amendment. And it also grants Congress more power, basically saying Congress has the ability to accomplish any of these goals, such as removing slavery, making sure that all people in the United States have the right to property, to make sure that all of the former slaves are granted citizenship. All of those kind of things, Congress is given more power there, which most of Congress's other powers occur in the main text of the Constitution. This is the First Amendment that grants more power to Congress. So it's a super, super huge deal. It just completely reframes the way that our country was, the Reconstruction Amendments. And it grants a lot of new power, and it restricts a lot of power. So it grants new power on the federal level and restricts power on the state level overall. That's just, so there's the balance of power in the US system shifted in a way different from the original construction.
Sweet.
That
Yeah,
was all helpful.
that's awesome. No, that's even way more detailed than necessary. Beautifully putting it. No, in a good way. I'm serious. I love that.
What was the 50s?
So the 15th, okay, sorry, I think the 15th Amendment, I can pull out my constitution right there. I don't know.
It's very, very
But
simple. Go.
It's it's just like property, people just, I believe it's a black or white, you have the ability to own property, you can't have that deprived from you. I'll get my text.
Well, beyond the textual accuracy of it, just very simple to remember. Think about this. Imagine you're enslaved. Okay, what's the first thing that has to happen?
Citizenship, you're free.
You have to be first abolished. Yeah, the chains that bind you literally have to be broken. So 13th Amendment, 1865 is the abolition of slavery. Simple enough. What can happen next?
Become a citizen.
And only when you're a citizen, what can you do? Right, it has to go in that order. That's all you have to remember. The detail Ryan provided is absolutely brilliant and awesome. And if you can handle all of that, and really, thank you. It's very cogent thought, very good. That is only helpful. But if you want to keep it as simple as possible, it's just right. 13th and 65 abolishes slavery. The 14th and 68 grants the rights of citizenship to African Americans, reversing Dred Scott. Remember, 11 years ago, the ruling was a black man could never become a citizen in the US. Anyone, quote, of African descent, scandalously, this decision said could never become a citizen. That ends that. And then finally, okay, you're free and a citizen. Now you get the ultimate expression that women will get 50 years later, right? The ballot box, which is the 15th Amendment, 1870. So now this is my point number 2. If you say Reconstruction is a closed loop, you simply say, okay, it's from 65 to 77, these gains, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment as the lodestars, the leading lights. And within that, you have like in 1876, Mississippi, which is the most southern place in the world, has like an integrated legislature. They have a bunch of black senators, people like Joseph Rainey, black governors in the South. The guy's name, I think his name is Pinchback. He was Louisiana's governor. He was a black man. Like if that,
What's the year you're talking about?
the 1870s, 73, 74,
That quickly.
What? So W. Du Bois, arguably the most famous black intellectual in American history, only rivaled by Booker T. Washington, calls Reconstruction a splendid failure. And he means it as a demarcation double point. He's like, not splendid failure, like when the Vandals lost to Florida State 80-0, it was an epic failure, just the failure was epic. It's not a descriptive term. He means it was splendid, period, then it failed. He's saying, like, from a black man's perspective, Reconstruction was awesome. Thank God. Slavery over, citizenship, the right to vote, African Americans proving their equality by being governors and congressmen, that was splendid. But when Reconstruction ends in 77, Jim Crow comes in next, that destroys all that. Unfortunately, what are you going to have pretty soon after that? 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson. separate but equal. 1898, Williams versus Mississippi. If your grandfather couldn't vote, you can't vote either. Oh, that sounds pretty racist. Oh, it's not racist, just anyone's grandfather. Yeah, but it seems like all the people whose grandfather couldn't vote were enslaved. Well, it's too bad. Sorry, law's the law. So he would say that's the failure that comes in, this disgusting, oppressive stuff. So then on point number 2, you have to ask yourself, second point, is Reconstruction an isolated event that's boxed in, or is it part of a long civil rights movement? I argue for the second one. There's 4 dominant civil rights postulations. You have the NAACP and legalism. We're going to get rights through the courts. You have the separatism of something like Marcus Garvey, who just like, blacks and whites shouldn't get along, just each their own. For me, Marcus Garvey, from a black perspective, think blacks will do better away from whites, just be separate. You have the militantism of someone for the Black Panthers, or like even Robert F. Williams. The most noble, the most beautiful, upheld as the most Christian is that famous MLK, Rosa Parks, like I have a dream, right? 1963 MLK being judged by the content of their characters. Skin color doesn't matter. We're all brothers and sisters in Christ. That Pacific resistance, 4th prong of the civil rights movement is often the most famous one. People like Fannie Lou Hamer, et cetera. A lot of those people, which I agree, would say this begins in Reconstruction. That splendid failure that despite the rights being taken away from us with Jim Crow, it started there. That's our wellspring. Now, again, it's like saying, does Reconstruction begin in 63 or 65? I don't know. There's both arguments. Same here. You can very well be a professional historian, argue either, and say Reconstruction is isolated or it's part of the long civil rights movement. I like the second one. Who cares what I think, though, honestly. Yeah, go ahead.
Isolated, I say isolated because they were picking certain people. They were making sure they were all white.
What do you mean?
They were picking like friends or people that they knew, the governor.
During Reconstruction or afterwards? Well, but I mean, again, like, yes, but the radicals, especially what's our next class, they get their way. And we have, I'll give you profiles, these people next class. There are senators and congressmen and governors who are black who get into elected office. So, I mean, even maybe despite some of these racist intentions and to restrict the franchise and keep people excluded, African-American, recently emancipated people are breaking through. So I mean, even all the more impressive. I gave the example of Barb last class. If she was governor and everyone supports her and she does great, that's awesome. But if everyone is against her and she still triumphs, so maybe even more like credit because the whole tides are against these people. Okay, point number 3. David, you have a point. I think you always have a point. I always want to hear, but
I think it's really wonderful that the tour that just occurred was not while you were singing.
yeah, I know. Like it actually being, you're right. Yeah.
That's my point.
See, I don't know. That's hilarious. I'm totally burned and destroyed with that. Like you
Well,
would,
I don't
but-
mean it to offend you, but rather to elevate the whole.
I agree. Like if I'm in here,
Experience.
no, if they come in like this is our intellectual
Yeah.
formator. He's like maple syrup, baby. Yeah, it's not like that's bad. Yeah, it's like I agree. But I don't know, guys. I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I crave the stage. I was on Broadway for 5 years, understudy work largely. I crave a return. I only did Spanish work. I only did like American takes on Spanish telenovelas. It was awesome. And I want to get back.
You were on the road.
My signature line always was Ponte las pias. Ponte las pias, and I would leave the stage. That was it. That's what I said every single time. It was my role. I was that guy. Get your batteries in order. Like up the head. Like someone's not getting, they're not thinking, Ponte las pias, and then I would just leave. That's what I did. That was my thing. It seems like from your reactions, you guys don't respect that. Okay. Well, it's hard work anyways.
I think they were hired.
I know, I was.
Telemundo.
Telemundo me escribiendo muchos cartas cada día con muchas preguntas y mucho dinero también y mucha cerveza especialmente. Sí. Point number 3. Point, Barb, can we be, I think you want to be serious.
Oh, yeah.
Let's be serious. Everyone remember point number 1, in a class, it's been so ridiculous to date, a lot of singing and show tunes and stuff. We got a lot of maple syrup done today. Great synapse, great 2 points, 2 dual excellent points, right? Thank you to our resident lawyer. I'm serious. I'm not being sarcastic. Ryan, thank you. Thank you for letting us walk through your beautiful mind.
Yeah.
In both examples, where does Reconstruction begin? Point number 1 and point number 2. Is Reconstruction itself a closed event or a long durée? Point number 3, more in line with Foner, on the feast that the Reconstruction begins before the end of the war, Foner highlights Lincoln's issue of the proclamation of amnesty and Reconstruction, promulgated, and maybe I purposely use that word, issued on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception in 1863. On December 8th, Abraham Lincoln lays out this kind of what Ryan was saying earlier, this plan of what are we going to do with the defeated Confederates. This is now post-twin defeats. This is a month post-Gettysburg Address. What are we going to do, right? And so now, the excellent early commentary, brilliant and genius about oaths, right? Listen to what they say. There's 3 areas of concern in this proclamation, right? 1, what are the pardons going to look like and the restoration of property for those engaged in the rebellion? Are we going to label them all traitors and execute them? Are we going to, what are we going to do? Second, Lincoln says, I think I'd like a new state government to be formed, allow it to be formed in the former rebellious states if 10% of the eligible voters take this oath of allegiance, right? And third, the southern states will be admitted and the plans will be developed around the idea, the sine qua non, the unmissable factor that slaves must be freed and their freedom must not be abridged, and that the Southerners must accept this. So if 3 points in recap, this is point number 3 overall, but 3 subpoints. Point number 1 is, okay, we might restore property and be lenient with the Southerners. In fact, Lincoln is epically lenient. There's 2 guys executed in the war, as far as I know afterwards. Henry Veers, the commandant at Andersonville, and this guy, Champ Anderson, I think, this guerrilla warfare guy, Champ Ferguson, perhaps. Yeah.
It's more than that though, because it's not just executed, but prosecuted, right? Like,
It's just extremely lenient, insanely so.
across the board, I think if you look.
It's like, we're good guys. Yeah,
like,
right.
We're done. We're they.
Exactly. Jefferson Davis flees. He spends some time in prison, but it's like, exactly, it's unbelievably lenient for like what happened for 600, for the worst cataclysm in American history. Yeah, exactly.
I think like 3 years or something.
I don't even know if it's that long. Yeah, I know he's in prison for a little while, but it's just basically like, let bygones be bygones. We'll talk about why that is in our last chronological lecture in a week. Why is the North so lenient? There's a lot of different theories. But again, 3 points, right? Issued on December 8th, 63, in the middle of the war. The base is still in the process of breaking. It's still a 3rd quarter. Maybe Foner's right. That's that first one. Maybe we reconstruct as the war is ongoing, because these 3 points say, again, we'll allow perhaps restoration of property, point number 1, but now point number 3, that cannot include slaves. Down, away with the evil, horrible idea that people can ever be property again. Thank God. No more slavery. So the South has to accept that, or everything's off the table. Point number 2, your excellent point about the 10% oath, right? You want to come back in, do your oath of allegiance to the government. All right, that was 3 points. What's point number 4? Point number 4, let's go. January 31st, 1806 plus 5. No one talks about time that way. I just did. 13th Amendment. I wish I could do a Christopher Walken accent. I wish I really could. It'd be so awesome. January 31st, 1865, 13th Amendment passed 119 to 56. Okay. And this 13th Amendment, as Ryan and myself both talked about, Ryan much more eloquently and much more detailed than I gave, but just my simple thing, 13th Amendment just is the foundational step. It just literally says, right, look, we can't have any kind of African-American equality without freedom. It's just the Freedom Amendment. It's the big one, because it's like no more slavery. And then 3 years later, 1468, which we'll talk about next class, it's already in the next timeline, and 1570 is the more developed, splendid part of the splendid failure, as Du Bois would argue, right? Sadly, anyone know what a lot of southern states immediately passed in reaction to the 13th Amendment being passed? What's the backlash? Backlash happens immediately. What is passed? What are these things called? They're known by a certain... Jim Crow is simply like an umbrella term that's never defined for just backlash by embittered, lost cause people who wanted to hold on to slavery by any means necessary and wanted to keep African Americans down. And it's just a large umbrella, and all these things are part of the Jim Crow South. Long durée arguably stretches from Reconstruction through like 1950s and 60s and all that kind of stuff. So yes, it's part of like the Jim Crow thing, but Jim Crow is not, it's more of like Jim Crow is more of like the paradigm or the larger umbrella of this way. Well, what's a specific legal thing that gets implemented? Anyone know? Also part of it, black codes. They're called black codes. An array of interlocking laws essentially intended to criminalize black life. So just basically like, these Yankee guys, right? They passed this amendment, no more slavery. So just pass a law that anything black guys do is wrong. Like just umbrella. It's just like, yes, of course, it's sadly just purely racist and hateful and okay, period. But it's just the Southern wannabe still old South antebellum slaveholder response to the amendment. They're going to do that. This is our response, right? We're not going to, and sadly, I say with great shame because I love Mississippi so much. Mississippi was the first first state to pass such codes under a larger law entitled An Act to Confer Civil Rights on Freedmen.
Like, for example,
Give us an example of this law. Okay, so Mississippi would say that this law required black workers to contract with white farmers by January 1st of each year or face punishment for vagrancy. Okay, and so it basically says we're not doing slavery anymore. We're doing this other thing. Oh, that seems like slavery. It's not. But wait a second. If you're not working for a white guy who happens to be a plantation owner, you're going to be arrested and you're going to do the exact same work. And by the way, just like a lot of the people in the North, like the Pullman in Chicago and the different like factories that abuse people who made them like live on the company property and buy from the company house. So I'm a black man. I'm no longer enslaved. That's awesome. Thank God. But I have to work for this slave owner that I worked for before. Maybe it's the same guy, I'd say, right? We're going to help him rebuild the plantation. I'm going to get paid $1 a week, but I have to buy all my supplies for him for $4 a week. So at the end of the month, I've made $4, but I'm $12 in debt. And so I'm just in slavery again. Like the sharecropping system that develops out of this becomes basically just slavery by another name. And so that's the Jim Crow get started. Right, exactly. Let's see what else here. A lot of this too, exactly. A lot of this stuff goes with the Williams and Mississippi thing that has not passed for 33 years of 1898. But basically, like anything I say to you, like the freedmen, applies because your grandfather had no rights. So it's like in an American society where we claim like it doesn't matter who your parents are, like, well, this matters here. So again, nothing is new or shocking. It is shocking and horrible, but this is not surprising. This is just the age-old kind of, the South was angry they lost the Civil War and then they had to give up slavery. They liked slavery a lot, sadly. And so they're like, well, how can we do it without actually doing it? This happens all the time, right? Whenever a pro-life law is passed in a state, yeah, but how can we do abortion and not call it abortion, right? Let's call it something else and just do it anyways, right? Or, Catholics, even on small things, right? You can't eat meat on Fridays. Yeah, but how can I eat meat without eating meat? Like, what if I do this instead? What if I say something nice to Barb? Then I can have meat, right? Like, we're always trying to get around certain things. It's just very human and horrible. Point number 5. Ryan Alexander had this answer last class. The Freedmen's Bureau is this massively important thing that gets implemented by the North. Okay, it's a U.S. federal, this is point number 5 today. This might be all the points to talk about today. Very kind of introductory lecture to Reconstruction. Is a U.S. federal government agency established right at the end of the war in 1965, right after, which for all intents and purposes, attempts to change society in the South. How do you think Southerners who already hate Yankees feel about this? I'm not even going to answer the question, right? This is where the legendary, like, how dare they? These Massachusetts people, remember that earlier synapse coming down, bringing their temperance, no drink, no fun attitude, changing the South, changing our way of life, all that kind of stuff. Well, the Freedmen's Bureau is simply like, okay, there are all these emancipated slaves now. I think at the start of the war, there were 9 million people in the South and 4 million were slaves, if I'm not mistaken. It's almost half. A lot of people that are emancipated. There's a big change in society, right? What do you think the number one thing the Freedmen's Bureau is going to do? I'm going to tell you what's actually the most important thing it does, the largest lasting effect, and the thing that remind me if I forget to mention the failure. A lot of historians say this is unfortunately where it didn't help enough, and this is why maybe Jim Crow persists for so long. What is the Freedmen's Bureau's first kind of assignment? What do you think it is?
Finding proper livelihoods for.
That's secondary.
Okay.
What's even more important than that? Think about it.
Voting.
No, that's also later on. It's very important too. We're going to get to that next class. Remember, voting won't come for 5 years, 1870, right? You can't vote until you're a citizen. At this point, it's like, just thank God. That's the second point I made. It's going to be the largest lasting impact. Please remind me if I forget. That's what I want to talk about the most. even more important. Remember, 3 things I want to talk about the Freedmen's Bureau. The real most important thing it does, the actual long lasting, what you just mentioned now, literacy, let's cut to the chase now, education, we'll get to that. But what is, and then the thing that fails, what is the most primal human thing you think that they have to do?
Work.
No, that's also later. No. Reuniting families, reuniting families. Literally, the first thing, now you can argue, oh, really? Reuniting families is more important than food and water? No, of course not. I don't count food, water, sanitation, going to the bathroom, like natural things you have to, I mean, like everyone, that's just, breathing is the most important. If you don't breathe, you die. We get it. Like, I mean, like beyond the real most essential. Yeah, tragically, may God have mercy. One of the worst parts of slavery was the separation of families. And a lot of people, right? Or like, I want to find my wife or my brother or my sons or whatever. And a lot of people take to the road. Like, I'm free now. I'm going to use my freedom to just try to find my family. First thing the Freedmen Bureau wants to do, number one, is kind of like identify people. Okay, what plantation were you from? Your wife, tragically, imagine these conversations. Like, when was she sold or whatever to someone else? How many years? Okay, this is here. Yes, the first thing is like family reunification. Now to you, the second enormous thing it does is education. Exactly. My grandmother, God rest her soul, lived a beautiful long life. She died in 2013. She was 91. Maybe all lived such a life. Had her sharp mind to the day she died. Grandmother was hilarious. I've told you stories about her before, I think. I don't want to get too far off in a rabbit hole, but the first time that she met my wife, I think I mentioned this. I was trying to make a really good impression. And my grandmother was awesome at like epic emotional trolling. Like, she says to my wife, when I'm like trying to like, again, like, hey, like my, everything's great with my family. And it was like, my parents loved my wife from day one. It was great. But I go to meet my grandmother and she's like, basically breaks down crying as like a joke on me. And I'm like, I know I'm gonna get roasted. And she does. She's like, tests to my wife. She's like, I can't believe that you're with him. I thought he'd never find a woman because he has mismatched socks. He's terrible. Like, she was amazing, just like epic troll. She's awesome. And of course, it was the best ice. My wife loved it. It was a very bonding moment. My grandmother was of that old generation, born in 1922, but where education is everything. And she would always say that. It was like so cliche and like, I got it, grandma. But it's true. Like, education is everything. It's power. It's true. That is the ultimate job of the Freedmen's Bureau, literacy, getting Black children to read and write, which was illegal before. If the slave owner saw, Black kids writing, they would, get beat or worse, God have mercy, awful things, because literacy and knowledge is power. If you can read the Bible and say, oh, it seems like Christ, who's God, wants us to be free and slavery is bad. Oh, I can read the Declaration of Independence. It seems implied that all people are equal. Like, why am I enslaved? Like, so get people literate. And anyone know what the greatest lasting contribution out of the Freedmen's Bureau educational push is? What emerges out of that is still with us today?
Historical Black.
Yeah,
colleges.
exactly. HBCU, the historical Black colleges and university. Examples being like Dillard University, Shaw, Southern, Grambling, Alcorn State. The first one, Tuskegee with Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington's epic. He founds Tuskegee on July 4th, 1881, purposely. Literally saying like pun intended, I'm finding on Independence Day, because it's a new independence for all people to be equal. And he founds it in the very kind of like American farmer, very Jeffersonian spirit. When Booker T. Washington's like, yeah, Black people will be like equal in America, I believe, when they come to my school and they learn Greek and Latin and all the kind of high educational stuff. But my school is in a rural area on the farm because I want them to be farmers and self-sufficient as well. And like, that's what Jefferson said. Thomas Jefferson said the ideal American is like the agrarian philosopher, the guy who's unreliant on big government, big daddy, communist money schemes, because he has his own chickens and farm. And he's like Barb. He doesn't need the internet, doesn't need anything. He just lives off the land. And so he's right. Like, you're not susceptible to coercion when you run for governor because you are totally self-sufficient. That's great. Plus speaking Greek and Latin and whatever, and all those kind of things. That's the HBCU movement. Right. Let me see if I have any stats for you. I will, again, this is the introductory. These are our only 5 points for today. We're basically done. I'm going to get really heated with the Reconstruction next class, like the real big facts, because that second area, the radical phase of 66 to 73 is when everything heats up. When the HBCUs start really producing fruit, when you see the African-American politicians gaining office, the integrated legislatures, you see the backlash, you see the riots, the founding of the KKK, like a bunch of everything is like blowing up in America. This is just the opening thing. And I kind of leave you, those are good 5 points, I dare say, those are good 5 points for thought. If I can remember off the top of my head, right? Number one, does it begin in 63 or afterwards? Number two, is it a boxed event or long? The third point was the December 8th, 63, right? Three-pronged thing, 10% of the vote, Lincoln's proclamation of amnesty and Reconstruction, 4, 13th Amendment, and 5, HBCUs, Freedmen's Bureau, right? That's good for today. It's a lot of maple syrup for today. But next class, we're going to get like, next class, there's no singing. There's no Spanish. There's no, maybe there's either no Spanish or it will be exclusively in Spanish. I haven't decided yet. I want to, you know, it'd be so awesome. I want to do it exclusively in Spanish and I apologize so much. Spanish is a beautiful language. I apologize for my gringo accent, my like Spanglish, Spanish. I destroy the language. I'm sorry. But even with my horrible Spanish, I would love to do it all in Spanish, just subtitle it later. And it'd be so awesome. And then Dave Schmidt, how dare you? When people came in before, I want to set that as a promotional video. Like, here's what our class is like. And then have all the kind of, I know people be like, why is it in Spanish? Like, I just want to see the reactions. Next class, there's going to be no synapse, especially. We spent like a good 20 minutes on that Civil War synapse, I think is useful. But nonetheless, it'll be all Reconstruction. So we'll kind of dive, I might have like 20 points for you next class. So very good stuff. And then we're really, at that point, this Reconstruction block plus the synapse, that's the class. And we'll basically just kind of finish with that. Anyone have any questions for me? See if there's anything. I haven't even checked in the chat. Oh, there's something in the chat. Earl Aston wrote land for ex-slaves. Earl Aston, you are literally a genius because that was the third point. I forgot that. I said I'm going to talk about 3 things. And thank you. Thank you. So this would be the Earl. Thank you. Thank you all for the reminder, because number 1 priority of point number 5, Freedmen's Bureau, was uniting families. Number 2, education, the HBCU. The largest failure was the failure to get African-Americans into positions of land ownership. Because in America, there's always this idea, right, that if you own land, you can vote. Like that's the stronghold. We have to ask Ryan Alexander what he thinks. You know, we love the guy or we hate the guy. He owns 300 acres of like prime land. He's an important businessman in town.
This is something in property class last semester. We actually learned about the Civil Rights Act of 1871, which under the powers granted to Congress, establishes, basically says states cannot deprive people's property ownership rights based upon race. So that's what really what forces states not to do their little legal hijinks and say you can't have title to land if you're black or if you have slaves in your ancestry going back 3 generations or doing any of that kind of thing, because Congress quite intelligently passed a law which allowed people to start getting these pieces of property. So that's why, I mean, you do have a lot of black landowners in the South today, which is way different compared to like inner cities and the northern city. It's just a completely different circumstance. I think it's a lot better for people now.
Sure.
But that's a larger discussion.
Good. We'll have the discussion next class, and all that middle phase gets at all these things. It's not just that it's 7 years and wow. We spent four months on 4 years of a Civil War. We're talking about 7 years, almost double the time in a 1 class period. But like next class, we'll really kind of get after it. So it should be a lot of fun. Last thing of note as well, again, besides my constant, just thank you. It's such a pleasure for me to be here with you guys. We have our last, at least of the intellect department, the last thing in the semester on Wednesday. It's our Spirit and Life on prayer. So as always, the wonderful Andrew Gogol will be the kind of the MC and leader. And then of course, the highlight of the night with Father giving his reflections, and I do a little thing before he goes on as well. I hope you'll join us for that. I think it's always this Wednesday. Yep. Which is actually perfect on prayer and Holy Week, and just really cool. Yeah. And next semester, like I said again, I'm doing a class kind of on America. I can't wait. Just go full America, and I want to go like I'm gonna tell you in advance. I think you know where I'm going with this. Like it is going to be so weird at times.
Thanks for the warning.
So invite one and all.
On the syllabus, like this is the weird class, so we could plan.
I think
that should just be the very first sentence of the syllabus. This is a weird class.
Well, I think I just want to have like one time, like I think I just want to have like a slideshow once where it's like first slide is like the American flag, and the Star Spangled Banner starts up, and then it cuts. and then a bald eagle flies, like a bald eagle noise, and then an eagle flying over the Grand Canyon turns into a person, and it's Abraham Lincoln, and he like just something like, yeah, just like, where is this going? But I promise to tie it all together. So this, I'm happy that Maple Syrup episode number 4 is recorded. It'll be posted to Earl. By the way, again, I don't know if I mentioned this when you were already on the stream, but again, I heard from Heather Meyer that you were wondering when the episodes are going to be posted. They're on my private channel. So I will send you the links of this will be episode 3 did not get recorded last class because I'm a moron and forgot to press record solely. It's the only reason. It's my fault. But this one is number 5.
Start over.
Yeah, I'll do it again. Exactly. I write all my scripts out for every lecture, so I even write down the jokes and the awkward pauses, like when I spoke. Number 22.7, do this with coffee. Oh no, yeah.
Not again.
What have I done? What has become of me? Like, but anyways, yeah, I'll send you all those things. And yeah, Dave Schmidt.
I have a trivia comment. Recently, we talked